However, before we get to Godzilla Minus One, let's back up really quick to 2014, which was the last time, Dan, the last time I went through all of them. I was doing an article for Horror Hound on the entire Toho series, and that was the last time I went through them in sequence. But it was a wonderful bingey time. And then to get the 2014 was kind of like, oh, that's different, is what that is. Mark, you and I talked when we were getting prepped backstage. You know, the Monsterverse, I mean, this is very much kind of the origin story. It's the one that gets things rolling. But I know you've talked to, kids like this is their favorite version of Godzilla. That's where they're coming from. Because I remember at that first G-Fest when this movie came out, there was a sense of, I don't know about this Godzilla.
Yeah. Well, I think the ambivalence comes from, typically, your older fans, right? And some of that may have to do with the fact that this Godzilla's origin is different than any of the others, in the sense that he's just always been that way in deep history. And he wasn't necessarily created by a thermonuclear test or anything. I mean, he can take a nuke to the face and evidently be all right, but he's just always been that monster and sort of that king, the titan, to use their language. So that is sort of jarring when you really stop to think about it. It's a different beginning. But like you were saying, my wife and I are really involved with some of the kids programming at G-Fest, and what we get to hear and see is what they enjoy the most and what they choose in terms of what page am I going to color or what Godzilla am I going to draw. And 9 times out of 10, it's the legendary Godzilla. It's their entrance. Just like my entrance into Godzilla was 70s Megalon, Godzilla versus Gigan. That's the Godzilla that got me in. This is the Godzilla that's getting them in. And it's a bigger leap because they're going from CGI to, if they are going back to the older films, to the suitmation or the man in the suit and the tokusatsu building, the world building, like was being talked about earlier. So it's just fascinating because there's like 6-7-year-old kids who will look you right in the eye and say, Godzilla X Kong is the best Godzilla movie ever made. And you can't convince them otherwise. And I don't know that that's necessarily a worthy goal to try to convince them otherwise, because it's going to lead to other things eventually. But right now it's what they're playing on the playground, and that's cool.
And Godzilla doesn't belong to any of us anymore.
No, for sure.
Dan, what was your response to 2014 Godzilla?
Yeah, so it's funny. I actually saw it for the first time on my bachelor party. It had just come out. I had a big group of guys with me, and we saw it in IMAX, and it was after a day of like going through theme parks at like Universal and everything. And we were all like a little drunk, and none of us could get seats together. And so I was like seated just by myself, and I was so blown away by it. And I was convinced that everyone was going to be on my side at the end of it. I'm like, that was so different. It's like I said before, I felt like he was a force of nature in the movie. I loved how they would cut away during some of the fights, and then we would see it later through different vantage points. And we get out, and like this group of like 10 guys I was with, like maybe 2 of them thought it was kind of good, and the rest of them fucking hated it. And like I was so mad. I was like so mad. I was like, really? Like, and I was convinced like you guys just didn't get it. You didn't get it. And I read the article on the dissolve I mentioned earlier. I was like, see, that was the point. That was the point. We didn't need these humans. Yes, it was like I like that Bryan Cranston died in the beginning and that we just get this mighty Godzilla. And I stand by that with this movie. It's the most of all of them, except for Minus One, maybe. It's the most just overwhelmed and flabbergasted by Godzilla that I feel. That said, it did kick off the Legendary Monsterverse, which I don't dislike, but it's strange because it still has that kind of fascination with Godzilla and that like majesty of Godzilla, but then mixed with the goofy battle royale stuff with monsters. Like I said, I don't dislike it necessarily, but it feels like it's trying to have its cake and eat it too a little bit in terms of tone, which is weird because it started off so serious, and it started off, I think, with a very clear intent. And then it just eventually became about having this kind of fun multiverse. It's hard for me to hate on any Godzilla movie too much, though, because like you guys said, we have all of them, right? If you want serious Godzilla, there's plenty of serious Godzilla. If you want goofy Godzilla, there's plenty of it. When I saw the preview for the new Kong Godzilla movie, which I still need to watch, I was like, I don't know about that. But you know what? I just got Godzilla Minus One, so I'm good. Like, it's not like it's like a Halloween movie where I'm like, oh man, I gotta wait 10 more years for another piece of crap. You know, it's like there's always a bounty of good and bad Godzilla material, so I don't get too hung up on it. But anyway, I'm a huge fan. It's like one of my favorites in the franchise, and everyone at my bachelor party was wrong, except me and there's 2 other guys. Yeah.
Barry, how about you?
Dan, don't be upset with me, please. I don't want to get
I say you don't have to bury it too deep, Barry. It's okay.
It's all good.
Okay.
I'm sober now, so I'm fine.
I don't want to, because like Mark said, I love G-Fest. Favorite event of the year, pretty much. And I love the fact that there's so many kids there. It's awesome. And amazingly, this year in general, I find kids tend to purchase or collect more of the like 60s and 70s Godzilla stuff, particularly the SH Monster Arts articulated figures. I love those. I sold 18 of the Godzilla 1971 there. Kids were clamoring for that. It was gone like the first day, and I had 2014 stuff and they asked for it. But I think the nice thing about these films and this film is that it's a gateway, for kids and for today's audience. And I think that's wonderful. They can go to the theater. It's a great experience to go to the theater and see a Godzilla movie. And then most of them, go into it, investigate, and do find, something in the older films. I went to the original Godzilla at the Film Center 4 months ago. 20% of the audience was kids, the original Japanese version, like kids under 12 or 13. It's fantastic. So in that way, I don't want to be negative about it, because I do think it's great. And again, it is something to spread the gospel of Godzilla. Anything that does that, I'm all for it. For me personally, this Godzilla design and this execution of Godzilla doesn't have really anything for me as a Godzilla fan. It has no connection for me whatsoever. There's nothing in that Godzilla I can look at and say, oh, wow, this is the energy. This is the connection. This is the Godzilla that he's lumbering. He looks like an elephant. He's powerful. He's big. The other monsters, the Mutos, I don't think that design is very impressive at all. It's kind of like a little bit like Legion, in the Gamera films, but not quite with the energy of that or the interest of that. And I think in general, I don't like those films, or this 2014 in particular, because the beginning of the film sort of turned me off already. When Bryan Cranston, they live near this nuclear power plant, like right out the window, and it's having some collapse and meltdown. And Bryan Cranston's wife and his crew is running away from nuclear smoke in the tunnel, like running away from nuclear, whatever. And I was like, okay, this is going to be whatever. And I just have
that's
a hard
science,
time.
Barry. That is honest to God.
Okay, all right. Well, Lee, why don't you fill us into that science? Okay, fill me in on running away from nuclear detonated smoke. Okay, you can fill me in. But I just there's something in those films that doesn't connect with me as a Godzilla film at all. I can't identify it. It's a licensing agreement. The character doesn't seem like Godzilla to me at all. But that doesn't mean that I can't understand why other people can appreciate it. It does have a scope to it that I understand that people appreciate, especially today and in today's films. You have to have something like that. If a Showa Godzilla movie came out and looked just like that in the theater, it would not have the same audience that film had, obviously, or the same appeal. So I really do appreciate that in the sense, but for me, there's just not a connection.
That was actually my feeling too. I said, you know what? This is not my Godzilla, but I'm glad there's a Godzilla out there for this new generation. And it does seem to be resonating. Michelle, how about you? I know you said you weren't a huge fan of the Monsterverse. What was your reaction to this 2014 when it came out?
So I will say, I'll preface this with, it had the most kick-ass trailer. It had remember that trailer, and they were doing that dive bombing, and they had the smoke coming down, and then it was like Oppenheimer, I am become death. That was baller as hell. I was like, dude, this shit about to be so good. I was had my Godzilla shirt on. I was fucking popcorn. I was ready to go, and I hated every second of that movie. I hate it, and I understand that it lets new people get into the series. I get it, and I have nothing, and if you love it, that's awesome, but every part of that movie is just dumb to me, and I don't like any of the human characters. Are very bland and generic. like the most generic characters that have no motivation for basically anything, and then you get all excited because Bryan Cranston's in it. You're like, oh man, it's gonna be really good. He's like such a great actor, and then he like fucking dies like in 20 minutes, and then like when they show Godzilla, he's just kind of like, I don't know. I don't like his design. I don't like the Muto designs. I didn't like the music. It's shot way too dark. You can't see shit that's going on in the last third of the movies. Like, just like, I'm sorry. I'm being really mean.
Nope. Thank you. Thank you.
I just hate this movie so much.
You're just doing Barry's work for him. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
I
love you.
I appreciated it a little more because all the MonsterVerse movies after are like way worse somehow. So like out of all those movies, it's the best one. Honestly, like I appreciated it way more rewatching it. I was like, if they would have kept with this kind of like, it's like a masterpiece compared to like Godzilla versus Kong and all the other shits that where he's got like a power glove and all. I don't even get me started on the movies, but it's actually not. It's the best of the Legendary movies, in my opinion. They took it the most serious, and it has the most involved story. It's not just like trying to get from plot point to plot point. There's actual connective tissue, at least. Even if the characters are bland, they're still A to B to C to D, act 1, 2, 3. There's like, connecting pieces. Is this, I do like holding the Muto mouth open and going right in his mouth. That's dope.
I think the two finishing moves of the two Mutos, those are, and that was part of my review. I was like, well, two amazing finishing moves does not an awesome movie make. Yeah. However,
top 3 Godzilla moves right there is ripping something's mouth open and doing the blast atomic breath right into his gut. That's fucking awesome. Sorry, Dan, I didn't mean to be mean. I know you like it.
So totally fine. No, I'm not offended at all. I promise. You can't come to my bachelor party. But
I hope all bachelor parties are just guys watching Godzilla. That's what I'm gonna think from now on.
It was fun. Yeah, it was a fun day. It was just so fun. I should, like I said, there were 2 other guys who dug it, but I'm on an island with this movie.
Lee, how about you? Really quick.
I've never been to a Godzilla bachelor party. It sounds like fun. Our opinions are all over the map on this one because I disagree with so much of what everybody said already. I hate the trailer. Absolutely hate that trailer. It's all about the Halo jump. It's a military movie. It's a war movie. And that's not what I go to Godzilla for at all. I have no interest in Halo jumps. And when people say, well, it was such an awesome moment, I'm like, what? In a Godzilla movie?
It wasn't cool in the movie either. They like snatched it up in the trailer. It wasn't even a cool. They even had the one cool part.
I actually went back to the trailer and watched it today, and I still hate the trailer. So here I diverge from everybody once again, where I've kind of grown to like the Monsterverse a bit. I'm okay with the Legendary Monsterverse. I love Hollow Earth. I'll go into anything that has a Hollow Earth. I grew up on Edgar Rice Burroughs and At the Earth's Core. I like that mythology. So merging it with the whole kaiju universe and everything, I'm game. I'm going with it. And so far of the 4 I've seen, because I haven't seen the latest one yet. So far the 4 I've seen, the one I dislike the most is the first one. I just don't like the first one much at all. It spends 1 hour foreshadowing monsters arriving, but it's foreshadowing the wrong monster. It's foreshadowing the Mutos instead of Godzilla. And, keep your eye on the ball. The ball here, this is a Godzilla movie named Godzilla. I don't need all this build up to the Mutos. And just the fact that they did a remake of Godzilla and raises the question of what is a remake? A remake of Godzilla, where this is like if you say you're going to do a remake of the Universal Frankenstein and you take the script of Frankenstein meets the Wolfman to work from. When you're rebooting, let's just have a Godzilla movie like what they did with Kong, where they had a Kong movie. It had a few other monsters, but they weren't the focus at all. The focus was Kong. But here, 1 hour before Godzilla arrives, and I wasn't involved at all.
No,
once you rise, I like them. I was okay with the design, and I love the breathing fire down into the Mutos. That was ultra cool.
I do one thing I do like about the Monsterverse is they do seem to be plucking these folks who have worked on small, scrappy little independent films and giving them these $200 million budgets to play with. You know, you got Gareth Edwards, who did Monsters, which is made on like $1.50. You got Michael Dougherty, who did Trick or Treat. And then you got Adam Wingard. You know, like it's like these guys have never had a budget before. And to watch what they do with a budget, I think is interesting. And I like the fact that they've continually taken chances with these directors that, you know, like have not demonstrated that they know what a blockbuster looks like, but they do know how to make a movie. And I think that all three of those directors made some really incredible genre flicks prior to being given the keys to the kingdom.
It's interesting too, is that you mentioned Monsters by Gareth Edwards. And I don't know if you've seen that movie recently or ever, but the plot of that is a lot like the 2014 Godzilla movie, in the sense that it's people trying to get back home, essentially, or
Right.
from one place to another. And I always thought that was, I don't know if Edwards did that consciously or subconsciously, but it really came through to me like he's overlapping his biggest hit so far with this gigantic franchise. And it just, you know, I don't know that it worked the way that he wanted it to work, but.
Or that's how he got the gig.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe.
They said, "Oh, that's the very story we're going to be telling."
Yeah. Yeah.
We're going to lean into our final round, and we're going to talk about Godzilla Minus One, which came out in 2023, and I think just kind of floored everybody with how excellent it was. It surpassed a lot of expectations. A lot of people consider it the best Godzilla movie ever made, even surpassing the original. One question I do want to raise before we dive into that one is, and Lee, you kind of touched on it, what makes these films, are they remakes? Are they reboots? I remember telling people that Godzilla Minus One was probably the best remake I had ever seen, you know, right up there with The Thing and The Fly and Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And people were like, it's not a remake. And I went, well, I think it is, because it's an origin story. It can't be a prequel because there's nothing in the 1954 version that would allude back to it. It's not retrofitting itself into that timeline. And we're getting the, you know, how Godzilla came to be. So I'm curious, like, do we see Shin Godzilla? Do we see Godzilla 2014? Do we see Godzilla Minus One as remakes, reboots? What do you folks call them?
Yeah, I call them remakes. I mean, the only one of those that you could argue is maybe a sequel is 2014, I think, right? Because you could argue that, like, oh, those nuclear tests were going on back then. I mean, but then you're like, well, how did they cover up Godzilla attacking Tokyo? Because no one knew about that. But point being, Godzilla existed a long time before that, and they acknowledge that. Shin, I feel like it's brand new. With Godzilla Minus One, I guess they acknowledge that Godzilla's been around for a little bit, but just given the timeline that it's
right,
World
it predates.
War II, yeah, like it would have to be. That's the start of it, right? Like I don't think it's supposed to be a sequel to Gojira or anything like that. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think they're remakes.
I'm fine with remake, but I really think of them more as reimaginings, where you take the essential components of what they consider to be a Godzilla film, and they reimagine a new and different story with it that doesn't have to be connected necessarily in any way. They're just playing with the essential themes that they find in the material.
And maybe what makes that different then is that there's a long running franchise similar to the Bond movies, similar to Superman, things like that. That it's not just a straight up remake, because there isn't just one thing that you're remaking. You're incorporating a lot of different ideas.
A soft reboot. I hear that term a lot. Soft reboot, kind of like where it's a reboot but not quite. But it's like it's kind of like in between a remake and a reboot. It's kind of just reimagining, like Lee was saying. But I've heard people call that term soft rebooting. Strictly
speaking, when I hear the word remake, I think you're remaking the same film in a modern context or with modern tools. I don't see Minus One as a remake in that sense. Just because the context is different, you know, and that's what I was left scratching my head when I heard people say things like, this is the best Godzilla movie ever. There's something in me that resists that and 100% says it can't be the best ever because you can't have this Godzilla movie without the first one, which is definitive. I mean, it's example A of what Godzilla is. I mean, it's finally realized. It's probably my second favorite Godzilla movie, but I don't know that. And in that sense, then it's not so much a remake as it is. I don't know. Reimagining is good. I like that. It's certainly working with the same stuff, the same material, and but saying slightly different things with it too. I mean, the themes that come out of it are not the same themes as the original film, and I find that interesting as well.
The really interesting one is the theme of redemption, which it changes so much to a kamikaze-like sacrifice to a not kamikaze redemption move. So they're still playing with the themes. They're playing with the original themes, but they're going in a different direction. They diverge and go to a good place. I like it.
For one, I remember turning to my friend and going, I can't believe that was as good as it was. It really knocked us both out. And like the incorporations of the themes of the original, using the music, using, echoes of the original, but doing it in a different way. Like there were a lot of things that I really appreciated about it.
I thought it was really extraordinary because the way that it brought the whole the kamikaze idea, it made it central and questioned its validity, in a very upfront sort of way. And I realize that's something that director, it's not the first time that he's dealt with that theme. I mentioned before the moment in Shin Godzilla that was so jaw-dropping. In this film, it was when Noriko works in Ginza and on the radio says, well, Godzilla's approaching Ginza right now. And there's just that moment of, oh boy, because she's in harm's way. And all that Ginza scene of destruction is so impressive to me. Even the stuff, usually I really have a problem with too much being revealed in trailers. And it's like some of the best stuff is put in the trailer, so it's no surprise. And even so, like one of my favorite things is that shot of Godzilla stepping down and the concrete buckles and it acts like a seesaw and people go flying. But in the film, it's still like an incredible moment. I don't know. I really appreciated the whole overall vibe of the film and bringing post-war Japan to life. And I realize, not every aspect of that is in the film. I wonder if Toho told the director not to do certain things because there are other ways that still that film seemed inaccessible to American audiences. And like up to the present moment, who knows what kind of Blu-ray is actually going to be available. That doesn't seem like Toho fan service to me, but be that as it may, a great film. And thematically, the thing that I like the most is it's what it ends up thematically saying is like, make the heroic sacrifice if you can, but try to live. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's something, and again, I can only see this through an American lens, but it felt very Japanese to me. It felt like it was addressing the Japanese experience. And again, maybe he's doing it in such a way that it is accessible to me as an American, and I'm going, that's the Japanese experience. And if that is, I mean, that's a great magic trick for a director to do, is to feel as though I'm getting an authentic experience, and yet it's being filtered for me to digest. And I think that's, that is kind of a masterstroke of populist filmmaking, is to make something that feels genuine and yet is also shot for a certain audience. So, but I did feel like it and Shin Godzilla and the original Gojira are very much kind of like, this is what Japanese people are wrestling with in this moment. Barry, any thoughts? I know you weren't as entranced with it.
The hype that came out before the film came out, everywhere I saw it on social media was saying best Godzilla movie ever, serious human drama. and that already concerned me. I saw who was directing it. I looked at some of his other stuff, and that concerned me. Then I saw the film, and to me, and I understand, I mean, everybody loves it. I got in a big trouble for writing a piece on my blog called Godzilla Minus One Very Important Thing. And I feel like this film played to me very much like the 1956 Raymond Burr version versus the 1954 Japanese version. I feel that in many ways it was sanitized. I think this director was instructed by Toho not to approach certain subjects that would be offensive to American audiences. I found that kind of offensive. I found his minimization of the horrors of nuclear annihilation offensive, in the heroine of the film getting blasted by a backblast of nuclear energy and then appearing smiling at the end of the film. I thought that really ruined probably the best moment in the film for me and just totally diminished it. But I think a lot of the screenplay leaves a lot to be desired. I think the method of getting rid of Godzilla, as outlined by Kenji, I believe is his name, the scientist in the film, is that right? I think that is an absurd sort of way to get rid of Godzilla, kind of reminiscent of Plan Z and Gamera, like sending him to outer space. And I think a lot of time was spent on it, but unlike the original Godzilla, where the method of getting rid of Godzilla had a much broader application and was very relevant to the intertwining of the themes of the film that were important for the rest of the world, this did not. It was extraneous. It was silly. It didn't make any sense in the way it was executed. It was like bobbing for Godzilla. He's putting these things on and he's going down, he's going up. Godzilla's from the bottom of the ocean. What would be a problem with him? That's where he's from. Why would you, I think it's a technocratic film. Technically, it's very well done in a lot of ways. I think that he is a technocrat, but I did not feel that there was any real soul to this film for me as a Godzilla fan, unlike Shin Godzilla, where I felt like they really felt it. I felt like he was doing the work of Toho to make a popular film, which is fine, to make something that would be recognized and get an Oscar, which is fine, but I feel like it's a pasteurization in a lot of ways. And I think it really avoided some of the important things that a Godzilla film at that time, like Shin Godzilla, could have been addressing. And I think it did. Now, I'm in the minority. I will leave it alone at that, and I will let everybody talk about it because I don't want to bring everybody down, and I'm sorry to do that. But that's just the way I felt about it.
No, Barry, I always appreciate what you bring to the panel, and I appreciate the fact that you can have a dissenting opinion and actually support it. So thank you for that, Michelle.
So I think I have two major themes I love in this film. The first one is that I think it's a direct critique of imperialism, and the fact that despite what people think, the Japanese people weren't super into the emperor making them fight a war that they felt like they were losing. They wanted to surrender, but the emperor wouldn't surrender because of his ego, right? And then that's why they ended up kind of getting bombed later, because they wouldn't surrender. But a lot of people in Japan were suffering while this war was going on, with they were starving to death. Nobody had any money. They were constantly getting firebombed. And then they were, forced to fight in the war, drafted into the war, and then they would be kamikaze pilots, right? And I feel like not everybody that was a kamikaze pilot wanted to be a kamikaze pilot, but like you want to save face. That's very important in Japanese culture, saving face. So I loved the idea of the main character having survivor's guilt in the beginning because he survived the Godzilla attack, and then he gets home and his home is completely destroyed, and he kind of takes that destruction onto himself, like because he didn't die for his country, that's why they lost, and not because they would have lost anyway, because the war, that's just the way the war was going anyway. So I love the idea of him kind of subverting the kamikaze, using the plane, but at the end, like ejecting out and not destroying himself. You don't have to die for your country. The people can actually come together and fight without like becoming just fodder, right? Like every life matters, every person matters. It's not just like nameless people dying. These are people with families. And then the second moment that really touched me was when Godzilla does his atomic breath that looks incredible. It looks so nuclear, his breath, and it's usually his breath kind of like beams, shoots out, but this one it looked like a nuke hit, which I absolutely loved. And then the black rain comes down, which they don't really show in Godzilla films. And the main character is like looking up the sky and he's covered in the black soot and the radioactive rain, and he just screams in anguish. It makes me think of that movie also called Black Rain by Shohei Imamura in 1989, that, you know, it goes deep into what the Black Rain actually did to the people that it fell on, and how people ostracized them and they weren't treated well by the Japanese government. The government failed them. Maybe a lot of people feel like the Japanese government fails them, even though they put up a front that they help everyone. Sometimes I feel like they don't, which is also what Shin Godzilla and Minus One are kind of like sister films, I guess you could say. They like play off of each other about the Japanese government not helping the people the way they should. And in both of them, people have to come together outside of the government to get anything done. I feel like a lot of the Godzilla films don't really show how harrowing it is to be in a Godzilla attack from the people view, right? It's usually like a kind of like a wide shot of Godzilla stomping on stuff and people are like, oh, Godzilla, and they're running. But this one, it's like, man, it's like really up close and intense. Like you feel like you're on the ground as Godzilla is attacking. You feel the anguish. And like Tokyo's already been bombed. That's why it's called Minus One, right? Because they were already level 0 from the war. And then Godzilla is bringing them down -1. It's even worse now because now here's Godzilla, right? I think that's why I like it so much. It just feels really organic and human. Maybe they told him to stay away from certain subjects, but you know, a lot of films in Japan are like that. Like, you know, old samurai films were like low key, like, you know, critiques of imperialism, and they would just hide it behind the samurai facade, right? They would just say what they wanted to say, but they would just use the cover of a different style of story to like make a critique. You know, Czechoslovakian New Wave films are like that. Like any kind of film made under duress where the government says you can't say this, they just find other ways to say it.
Lee.
I love it. It really blew me away. I loved the movie. One theme that I don't think has been too touched on yet and going around, I would share two things. One thing is the theme of forgiveness in it, where I just love the way that the mechanic who blames Koichi for the death of all his men is the one who gives him the ejector seat. I mean, he's the one who says, no, live. You know, so there's forgiveness there, but there's also forgiveness in the neighbor who initially completely rejects him because why didn't he do his job? But she ends up being such a help to the family there. So I just think it's beautifully done and very touching, which I don't necessarily expect to find in a Godzilla film, and I welcome in a Godzilla film. A bit sentimental, but I like sentimental movies, so it's okay with me. I wanted to share a little sentimental story where the movie just completely won my heart completely over. And this is entirely personal, so it won't work for anybody else. But I was watching the scene. Koichi's back looking for work, and he gets a job, and it's going to pay a whole lot, and he's happy. And then he tells Noriko what the job is. And I was sitting there in the theater going, they're really going to go there. And it's, you know, in the original movie, the 1954 movie, I forget his name, Ogata, the romantic lead, the unimportant romantic lead in the 1954 movie, he's in a salvage operation. But here they make it a minesweeper. And that's what my dad did. He worked on minesweepers. He went into the service right at the end of World War II and ended up as quartermaster on minesweepers out in the South Pacific Ocean. And I've never really seen a movie that touched on that profession, especially that acknowledged, well, actually, that's like the most dangerous profession in the world when you're coming right out of a world war like that. I love that they went there. Now, my dad did not work on a wooden minesweeper like that. He was on a big boat. But it really, I was like, oh man, that's that touched home. Yeah, it's a minesweeper. I know that job. That's what they were doing out there.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Lee. Dan, how about you?
Yeah, I also loved it. It might be my favorite Godzilla movie. And I don't love it necessarily for any socio-political context or even thinking about Japanese culture, which I know is a weird thing to say for a Godzilla movie, because I know there are a lot of different interpretations you could take from this film around those two subjects. For me, it's just really that I'm invested in the human story in a way that I'm not in so many other Godzilla films. I know I'm not the first person to say that. I think the common praise that I heard was, oh, it's the first Godzilla movie that could work if you take Godzilla out of it. Obviously, I don't want them to take Godzilla out of it because Godzilla's amazing in this movie. But yeah, I just am rooting for them the whole time. And it's really as simple as that. And then also just Godzilla being scary again. I talked about him being overwhelming in a really effective way in the 2014 film. And I do think he's scary in Shin, but in kind of this otherworldly, weird, grotesque way. In this one, he's scary to me like the way that the shark in Jaws is scary, right? Which we obviously see some homage to, I think, in that mind-sweeping scene where he's chasing the boat. Like he really feels like this predatory animal in a way that we haven't seen in a while. So yeah, my reasons for loving are just really basic and visceral, but it stirs those those blockbuster kind of emotions up in me. I wondered too about the endings. I know we were talking about how much hope is in the movie, and doesn't she have like a radiation rash in the end? Like
she's got like a bandage over her eye, but
there's some little stuff creeping.
Yeah, I'm curious if we get a sequel, which I'm sure we will. If they're going to explore that. I mean, I doubt they would like kill her or anything. That would feel really cruel at the end of this. But I'm curious though if it's going to have something else to say about the effects of nuclear radiation or just nuclear bombs in Japan in general. But I mean, we'll see. But yeah, that honestly that has little to do with why I like it. It's just the popcorn loving movie geek who just wants a satisfying, entertaining film just is so drawn to this in a way that I'm not always with all Godzilla films. I agree with what Mark is saying. I feel like I can't say it's the best because of the original, but it's definitely the one I enjoyed the most and wanted to watch again like right away after it was finished.
Similar to Barry, I mean, I felt like there was a bit of a cheat in having her survive at the end. I was kind of like, but at the same time, as several people have said, like the movie had won me over to that point where I was like, I'm okay with a happy ending. I'm all right with that. And yes, it's sentimental. And I'm like, it's okay. I think we've earned a happy ending at this point, even if it doesn't feel 100% honest. I remember seeing the 50th anniversary of Godzilla when it played for the first time on big screens, and it was the Japanese version, and we'd never seen it before. We were at the Music Box Theater, and when the puppet head comes up over the mountain, the audience laughed, and I went, "Oh no, you are not allowed to laugh at this movie. Like this is serious stuff, and this, come on, cut it some slack, everybody." Like I was all stirred up by that. This movie, I feel like there is no need to apologize. There's no need to ask for forgiveness or for context, or it just delivers what it sets out to do in a very authentic way. Like you said, Dan, it's a monster movie. Like this is a scary monster, and there are human characters that we can care about. This is a movie that feels like it appeals to the most people it could possibly appeal to. It isn't just for Godzilla fans. It's for movie fans. It's for people who like to see a rousing entertainment on the big screen. And I think like that's kind of its success story, is it takes everything that went before and distills it into this movie. That's what resonated on a wider scale. Not to say there aren't things you can certainly poke holes at. And Barry, again, I thank you for bringing up your dissenting opinion, because it allows me to think about the movie in a different way. That's why I love these panels, is because I get to see the movie in a different way.
Michelle's input the same way. I mean, I appreciate her analysis of it. Even if I didn't see that or feel it, I do appreciate that because I can see other people's perspectives and why they might have found something in it that I didn't. So it's always valuable to hear. I mean, even if I didn't experience it that way. So again, that's why I appreciate being on these, and I appreciate all the other input.
And I really do appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. What a wonderful panel this has been. Great discussion all the way around. Let's just go around really quick. Just some final thoughts on Godzilla and maybe a favorite moment from one of the movies we've talked about. And that'll bring us home. Dan, let's kick things off with you.
I love Godzilla. I hope we get Godzilla movies forever, because we've gotten animated ones, we've gotten goofy ones, we've gotten serious ones, we've gotten some that try to have everything. When I think about Godzilla versus the Ghidorah, the smog monster, it's great because it has this weird like acid jazz interludes, but then also I think it's like the first time we see blood in a Godzilla movie, and environmental message is actually pretty powerful and has gross effects. Yeah, I hope we get them. You can do anything you want with them. And there will always be plenty more options to go back to. Favorite moment, you know what? Look, I'm gonna rep the 1998 Godzilla. I know it's much maligned, but I don't care. It was the one that hit me as a kid. I've talked a lot on here about how I like Godzilla when he's scary, and there are goofy moments in that movie. Don't get me wrong, but I do think they make Godzilla pretty frightening when he's coming out of the harbor, and it's before we really get the reveal of him. We just see his spikes on his back. Kind of that feels frightening to me. And then I don't care at the end when his heartbeat is beating on the bridge. Like, I feel bad for him. Like, that movie gets me in the feels. I know there's goofy shit in that movie, but I don't care. It's just how much I love Godzilla, and that like it can be many different things to many different people. Not gonna say it's my favorite of the series. Not going that far, but just want to give it some love because I think it gets unfairly maligned.
And we did talk about it last year for the anniversary, so I'll make sure you get to watch that show as well.
Oh, you did? Oh, I didn't know that. On I listened to most of the episodes last year. You guys did on
yeah, we did Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, Godzilla '98, and Cloverfield. Kind of like big monsters attacking New York.
Oh, cool. All right, yeah, I'll definitely listen to that one. I'm a huge Cloverfield fan too.
Cool. Lee,
favorite shot from Godzilla, because I said before my second favorite shot was that matte painting shot, but I didn't say what my favorite shot is. My favorite shot in the 1954 Godzilla is the one where you get the whole image of the destroyed Tokyo with the flames in the background and the silhouette of Godzilla right in the flames. What a beautiful, amazing shot. All praise for the all the craftsmen who worked there. I guess it's mainly Tsuburaya would be the one who was really putting a shot like that together. But just that all of them were working together so effectively. The way that works with the music and the visual effects there, and everything works there. Beautiful movie. So I mentioned my second favorite shot, so I figure I should mention my favorite shot.
Thank you.
That's right up there.
And Lee wrote an incredible essay. I'm going to include the link down below in the comments about the friendship of Kurosawa and Honda, and really great article.
Yeah, you kind of left me an opening earlier to talk about Kurosawa a little bit, and I decided just to let it pass. But it was all about it. Yeah, it's about the nuclear theme that goes through these not very popular Kurosawa movies, where he seems to be playing on the themes that Honda succeeded so well in bringing to the screen in Godzilla. So it's about Godzilla. It's about I Live in Fear. It's about Rhapsody in August and Dreams. Those are the ones that I really think Kurosawa was attempting to do a Honda-like statement on Japan and getting of the nuclear age in Japan.
Michelle?
Well, I wanted to, give a little love to Godzilla Final Wars, which is just so people don't think I'm the most serious, Godzilla fan, because that is the most redonkulous ass movie out of all Godzilla movies, and it was directed by I think I'm butchering his name, Ryuhei Kitamura.
Yep.
He does. I actually love Kitamura because he does a lot of genre films. One of my favorite films by him actually is Versus, which is like this goofy zombie style. You could tell he really liked the Matrix comedy type movie, but it is like absolutely packed to the gills with just ridiculous stuff. I think one of the actors is like a wrestler in real life, like an American wrestler, and he just speaks English because he doesn't know Japanese, and they just give him these bizarre lines that sound like they make no sense, and and they wear these goofy suits, and it's just like it feels almost like a more kind of like tokusatsu kind of like Sentai team up type of a film. And it has like every Godzilla monster ever in it, and they're all just doing wacky stuff. So I just don't want people to think I'm a wet blanket. I'm a Godzilla wet blanket, okay? Like I do like the goofy stuff sometimes.
Barry?
I really love in the original Godzilla, the dolly shot, the long shot of, I think the segue of the dolly shots through the infirmary. With all the kids crying and the horrible destruction, which looks very much like what we see in documents from after Hiroshima and Nagasaki. looking just like that with the music, and then segueing into the dolly shot, which comes a little bit after, but I love both of these, of the choir and singing about the hope for the survival of Japan, you know, and Serizawa's changing his mind and, you know, deciding to use his weapon. I think those sequences really sum up for me what that original team was doing with the Godzilla films, and that sincerity. They didn't mince anything in those visuals. They didn't mince anything in how it was depicted. And I love that they were so sincere and authentic in the message they wanted to cross. And also they were just great craftsmen and filmmakers, obviously. So I appreciate them at the top of their craft and depicting that in the way they did with their very sensitive dolly shots going over this horrible trauma and the hope for Japan. I thought that was wonderful in that film.
Mark?
Yeah, there's just this one moment in Shin Godzilla, and it's very weird to identify as a favorite shot, maybe, but it's the third form Godzilla. You know, you first see the tail, then it's sort of the tadpole Godzilla, and then it's the red Godzilla. He's not quite Nightmare yet. And he just roars towards the sky. And when he roars towards the sky, it's the original roar, is the audio cue with that. And I just love that marriage of the original sound and everything that conjures up with the image of this new school Godzilla. And to me, that just like, it's everything. It's the whole bridging of this imaginative world that Godzilla represents. So I just, every time that happens in that film, it just is, it's like a goosebump inducing moment for me.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much. I know that this was a long discussion, and I'm so thankful for everybody's stories and personal recollections and thoughts about the films. I'm so looking forward to having you all back again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.